Again, my second talk today is about psychological expressions in Nafsan, and I'm co-authoring this with Julian Rott, who is also present here in the call right now. And this work has been done in collaboration with Lionel Emile, who is a native speaker of Nafsan. So oceanic languages are well known for the richness of psychological expressions. And the richness of this lexicon has also led us to investigate this further in Nafsan. And what we found is that Nafsan often explicitly marks emotions as being good or bad. And in particular, there's a lot of lexicon, especially with the word bad, which is sa. These constructions with sa and combining with different nouns, verbs, and clauses has not been previously identified as a specific feature of Nafsan, or many other languages for that matter. And also another point that we're going to make in this talk is that this kind of explicit signaling of emotional valency with the word sa in Nafsan is usually highly lexically underspecified or polysemous, depending on your analysis, in that it can refer to many different basic emotions. So let us first sort of describe what psycho-collocations are. So psycho-collocations are complex expressions that are specific to the psych domain. And their structures are often highly regularized and conventionalized. And usually it consists of two components. These are psychomate and psychonoun in the terminology of Matisov. And this psychomate refers to the verb or an adjective, like for example, hurt or broken in English. And then the psychonoun is usually the experiential locus and quite often a body part. And this would, for example, be heart in English, because we could say that someone is heartbroken. And there's also division of labor, where the psychomate expresses emotional valency. This is this distinction whether an emotion is good or bad. And the psychonoun encodes that the meaning is psychological or emotional. And psycho-collocations of this type are quite common in Austronesian and Oceanic languages. And there is a lot of literature on this. But like I said, we haven't found anyone talking about this sort of transparent signaling of good versus bad with the words that mean good and bad. So something about Nafsan, I have already mentioned it in my previous talk, but here you get a sort of a more zoomed in map where you can see where Nafsan is spoken. So where I did my fieldwork is in the village of Edinburgh, but Nafsan is also spoken on Eratap and Pango, and also to some extent in the city, in the capital of Port Vila. And it's spoken by several thousand people. Lynch in 2002 estimated it would be between 5,000 and 6,000, but it might be higher today. It probably is higher today. And as I already said in my last talk, grammar corpus and dictionary of Nafsan are all available right now. But the majority of this work that I'm presenting here will be based also on my fieldwork in Edinburgh in 2017 and 2018. So our methodology largely relies on these fieldwork elicitations and a questionnaire that I will describe now in more detail. So this questionnaire is targeting specifically psychological expressions, and it was created in the project on the typology of psych, alternation, morphology, syntax, and discourse at Humboldt University. And I conducted this questionnaire with Lionel Emile. And besides then focusing on this questionnaire, we will also look a bit into the corpus by Nick Thieberger and the dictionary entries that relate to these expressions. So how was this questionnaire created? So basically, it relies on the idea that we should not approach eliciting emotion expressions based on translation, because that introduces biases of different cultures. And this is an area that is quite susceptible to different cultural practices. So Julian and Verhoeven developed a scenario-based method which expands upon work by Levinson. And they identified 5 basic emotion modes, which are based on research in psychology. And these 5 basic emotions are happiness, which could be the lexicon for this in English, could be delight, interest, sadness, for something like sadden or mourn, anger, this could be annoy, enrage, and fear and worry. And the last one is disgust or offend. And this was done in a way that we get systematic variation of human and non-human stimuli, yielding 10 scenarios. And so what we found for Nafsan when we did this questionnaire is that simplex verbs are quite common for some of these basic emotions, like what we would characterize as basic also in European languages. So for instance, we have semsem for happy, maet for angry, krokur for shocked, and so on. But we also have some metaphors with body parts, which we were quite interested in. And here I present a few of them. So we have things like for happiness, we have things like heart jump, be excited, breath pull, be satisfied. For sadness, we have heart break, heart hurt. And for disgust, we have then the reference to more to the intestines or to the guts being bitter, and fear, spirit flying off. So this was just sort of an example, but now we'll focus in particular how, for instance, one of them, bad skin, and that is nakulsa, how it is used. So we're interested in this combination with the words for good or bad, and we see that we have usually either one body part or a more abstract noun. For instance, we can also have a word like thought that can then combine with good or bad. And in the domain of disgust, with these body parts, what we find is skin be bad, which means literally to be disgusted, but also have a bad feeling. We have guts be bad, for feeling sick, and head being bad for being insane because of the disgust that kind of the stimulus is still disgust in this case. And here we have the example from the questionnaire where the scenario was that a man suddenly found maggots in the food he was already eating. And so here the word that is used, the expression that is used is bad skin. So the man feels really bad because of the maggots, would be sort of a free translation, but it would mean something like the man felt his skin really bad because of the maggots. And so now we come to the sort of this idea that these expressions are more lexically underspecified because besides disgust, our native speaker, Lionel, told us that this nakulsa, bad skin, is sort of more general than that. It can describe many negative feelings like scare, bad instincts, feeling sick, sensing demoniac intervention or disgust, and many more. It depends on whatever context it is used. So in this context, we had disgust with maggots, but also fear is a possible meaning of this expression. And I also found evidence for this in the dictionary of Nafsan, where it says saying that your skin is bad, naklum isa. Here we have the possessive for the second person. That means that you have goosebumps, a feeling of nervousness, but you don't know why. And so we can see that nakul sa can actually have both disgust and fear expressed by this. And then we continue to one other expression, also with this word bad, and that is bad thoughts, namroan sa, which means thoughts are bad, but it can also mean something like dislike, get bad thoughts, and also feel bad. And both of these are associated with sadness, so both bad thoughts and feeling bad. In this context, where we had a scenario where a girl loses her favorite shell and she can't find it again, she doesn't know if she will see it ever again. What we got is the usage of this bad thought. The girl, her thoughts are bad because of the shell. What we find then is that this bad thoughts can still refer to additional types of emotions. So it is not only sadness, but this is an example from the corpus where we have something like evil thoughts, namoransa. If a man wishes bad things, and here, so instead of the noun, we have the verb to think. If the man thinks bad, but in fact, it means if the man wishes bad things on someone, he wishes some bad things on some friend. So we see that what we have here is crossing to, let's say, another emotion or another basic emotion, which in this case, so it's a bit more complex. Maybe it's not exactly anger as I put here, but it's some sort of anger or malice, and not necessarily just sadness. Which shows that these kinds of expressions can easily go over many different types of basic emotions, which shows that they're lexically underspecified. This is further corroborated by Lionel's comments that these bad thoughts not only refer to sadness and anger that we found in the corpus, but there are any kind of bad thoughts. So in Nafsan, with bad thoughts, we're saying they're having some negative emotions like worry, panic, fear, doubt. It can also refer to when someone is planning to do something evil or bad, and also when someone is sexually aroused. And then you will get what it is based on the context. So we can see that we can actually have 3 different emotions related to this expression of bad thoughts. And now we sort of come to a different morphosyntactic realization of this good versus bad expression. So there are these verb compounds in Nafsan, which is actually quite a frequent way of deriving different meanings of verbs. But what is interesting here is that we have this sa bad and we good being very productive in these verb compounds. So we have these combinations of an otherwise independent verb and this verb or adjective bad. For instance, le sa is si plus bad, which means hate. But then if you want to say that you like someone, you can actually use this with the word good. Le oui, si good means like or admire. And we have an example here. His brother destroyed his math and he really hates him for it. And hate is said with this le sa. And what is interesting here is that we actually see that we have another productive use of sa in this first verb, preng sa, for destroy, make bad, then becomes destroy. And coming back to the idea that really these expressions involving this emotional valency of good versus bad are somehow more lexically underspecified, we have another evidence for this, where we have nrung tesa, which means to feel bad, and it is often translated as sad, and it can also mean feel bad, or disappointed, be sorry. So it can also extend to some related meanings. But more interestingly, it can also, in the corpus, we found some evidence that it can also refer to things like dislike or even be annoyed or angry. And that can be seen in this example where there is a story, it's a traditional custom story. So it's a bit strange, but there is a pig wife that wasn't doing its wifely duties properly. And the man got angry that this pig wife wasn't doing what he thought she would be doing. And so he felt bad about the pig and he hit it and killed it. So when I say felt bad, it doesn't really mean he felt bad like in English, because then he probably wouldn't have killed it. But it really means something like he got angry at it. He was upset that this pig wasn't doing its job. So we can see that it can easily translate, the sadness can easily go to anger or some kind of malice in these verbs. And like I said, this sa bad and we good are extremely productive in Nafsan. Probably bad is even more productive because usually negative emotions sometimes have more distinctions. But what is interesting, they are productive both as derivational morphemes in these verb compounds, but also in complex expressions. So we will look at some more verb compounds. As I said, it's not only in Psych domain that these verb compounds appear. For instance, if you combine walk and bad, pasa means to limp. If you combine speak and good, that means to say thanks or pray. Til sa, say bad, is to criticize. Swallow bad is to choke. Behave bad is to spoil or behave badly. This one is kind of more literal. And that's quite interesting that in such a transparent way we can form these meanings. And another aspect where this is productive is also in these apprehensive complement clauses that I also previously presented at this conference. And we had a poster once just about these apprehensive complement clauses in several languages in Vanuatu. And they express undesirable events. And it is basically saying something like, it is bad that this and this could happen, so don't do it. It's another productive use, even in such a, let's say, more complex expression. Okay, so what can we conclude from this? So the Psych expressions, including sa, bad, seem to be more lexically underspecified. And more lexically underspecified first than non-Psych bad expressions. So like in this last slide, right? They seem to be more, because these combinations of non-Psych expressions with bad seem to be sort of more literal. Walk bad is to limp, literally walk bad, or say something bad is to criticize, to speak badly, and so on. And the way that these things like bad skin and bad thoughts can literally refer to so many different basic emotions shows that they're more, they can cover more more semantic domains, let's say. And on the other hand, they also seem to be more lexically underspecified than those Psych expressions that are not explicitly signaled as good or bad. And this could simply be because other expressions already have the emotional valency in them, and they don't need to be explicitly signaled as good or bad, and that in itself is more specific already. But we should think about the reasons for this. Why is that? Or is this sort of just an impression that we got from this study? So first of all, the reason why they're more lexically underspecified, more so than maybe non-psychological expressions, could partly be a consequence of the abstractness of the psych domain in language in general. So even in English, saying something like, I have a bad feeling, I feel bad at least could refer to many different things. Even though in English, we do see that there's some kind of idiomatization going on. And if I say I have a bad feeling, it's usually about premonition of something bad happening in the future. I feel bad is usually physical ailment or mental or so on. So even there, we seem to be more specific in English, but there is some kind of abstractness associated with words like feel and so on. But what is specifically interesting about these Nafsan bad expressions is that they often refer to several basic emotions, as I've shown. So for instance, the bad thoughts, namroan sa, or think bad, mrosa, and nrong tesa, feel bad, combine both sadness and anger, or some kind of malice. Bad skin combines disgust and fear. And this is really interesting because we sort of, yes, at the same time, we don't know if this is something that, if we look further, if we're going to find that this is a very often, if these emotions very often cluster around these meanings in different languages. But in the study that in which this questionnaire has been prepared at Humboldt University, we haven't found any languages that do specifically this type of clustering. And so the idea here is that for the outlook of this study is to find whether this type of underspecification or polysemy exists also in other languages, as I just said, and then actually testing whether this explicit good and bad expressions play a role in creating this variability and this higher degree of underspecification. And that is all. We're looking forward to your questions. Thank you.